let's just talk first of all about Partygate. I do want to get your thoughts on the help that we're going to be hearing for families dealing with the cost of living crisis. For me, the most damning words are the 5 words written in a WhatsApp message from the Prime Minister's very senior aide, Martin Reynolds. Party Marty, as became known, the man who organised that Please Bring a Bottle of Booze party. He invited 200 people to a party in the Downing Street Garden. Ended up being 30 or 40 in total who turned up. We got away with it, is what he wrote. Sue Gray reported on boozy parties, people vomiting, spilling wine at the walls, getting into fights. One party that went on till 4:20 in the morning, that was the night before Prince Philip's funeral, laughing and disrespecting security guards who tried to stop them because, weirdly, the security guards are the only people who seemed to know what the law was, being rude to cleaners, a lack of respect and poor treatment on multiple occasions, Sue Gray said. The head of the ethics, the government taking the karaoke machine to a leaving bash, an ABBA party in the Prime Minister's own flat with his wife Carrie Johnson not being investigated. The list goes on. The Prime Minister said yesterday in the Commons he was humbled. He said that he was appalled by some of the behaviour. He said, I take full responsibility for everything that took place on my watch. Does that mean it's over?
Well, it may be over. The Prime Minister certainly isn't humbled. I mean, it's all the behaviour of the small schoolboy confronted with his misdeeds. He's a chaotic and actually incompetent individual. This is what's so worrying. And he's imported the incompetence and the chaos in government terms into government with him. And what I found so fascinating about this report is even if there hadn't been a lockdown, the behaviour going on in number 10 Downing Street is not what one would have expected. But he seemed to be completely happy with it. And of course, the behaviour was partly in number 10 because it was the one place where the parties could take place, where the public couldn't see what was going on. I think it's one of the most disgraceful episodes, and the fact that the Conservative Party appear just to be rolling with it and to say, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it, I do find really worrying. I don't think the public are going to forget this. Well, so it's true that he can carry on, because unless the Conservative Parliamentary Party get rid of him, he can carry on to the next general election. But I think the damage it's actually going to do to the Conservative Party is colossal. And the one possibility of his still coming unstuck is that in the coming weekend, when Conservative MPs go back to their constituencies, they're going to get an earful from Conservative voters and from members of their associations saying this man isn't serious and he's got to go.
Well, the YouGov poll yesterday, we just mentioned 6 out of 10 people think he should resign, but only 7% think he will actually resign. 74% believe he knowingly lied, but only 51% of Tory voters. Now, look, an awful lot of that 6 out of 10 who think the Prime Minister should resign, they've thought that since the day he was elected in December 2019. They've always hated him for various different reasons, think he's oppose him on Brexit or because he's a Tory or anything else. The only thing that really will matter to Tory party, Tory backbenchers will be what, as you say, Tory voters actually think. 51% of Tory voters believe that he lied. Is there an element with Boris Johnson, though, where this is already priced in? We know he's got a history of mistresses. We know he's got a history of being sacked. He was sacked from the Tory front bench once by Michael Howard for lying to him. He's been sacked from journalism jobs for making up stories. We know he's got a history like this. It was priced in. People said they'd still rather have him than Jeremy Corbyn. And until recently, the polls, they'd still rather have him over Keir Starmer. He was going to deliver Brexit. They want an end of the wokery and lots of sorts of things like that. So people are saying, look, we don't think he's perfect. We don't expect perfection from our political leaders. We think that you're all corrupt liars. That's what a lot of people say. In which case, it doesn't matter whether it's him or anyone else. He's more likely to do the stuff we want. That's what a lot of voters are going to say.
We're not perfect, those of us in politics. That's absolutely true. But nor are most politicians corrupt, nor are most politicians serial liars. And that's what we've got. So actually, it's a very bad situation. And here we are, we're about to talk, I'm very happy to talk about some of the problems besetting the country. If we're going to get through those, that's going to require some tough decisions. I mean, one of the remarkable things about this government is it doesn't actually make very tough decisions at all. As we've just noted, it says something, 2 weeks later it changes. Its main way of operating is to chuck cash at things, which is not a very Conservative thing to do, because at some point there is going to be a day of reckoning. He's going to have to sit down with the public and say, we're going to have to take some really rather tough decisions. Now, why should you trust him when in fact you can't trust him on anything? And this is, I think, the fundamental problem. And this is why I do think this is going to be so immensely damaging to the Conservative Party if they stick with him. Because I don't think the public are going to forget. They realise they've got a dishonest, clownish individual sitting in Downing Street. I think the amusement value is beginning to wear off. And what they're now getting is distrust. Therefore, when he comes along and says we've got to do something difficult, why should they follow him?
I agree with you on quite a lot of that, and I imagine a lot of my listeners and viewers who still want him to stay over the other choices available will also agree with you in terms of those feelings. And I agree with you. I don't think most politicians are liars or corrupt, and there is an element where Tory MPs who stick by the Prime Minister and come out to defend him are basically, I think they know they're defending the indefensible. When I talk to them, behind the scenes, they don't say the same thing. And an awful lot of them, I think, are going to be tainted at the next election. That's going to be all over those leaflets when they defend it. And a lot of people are very angry, whether they, like my guest in the studio this morning, JJ Onisobi, had to say goodbye to his mother dying of COVID back in spring 2020 on the phone because he was not allowed to see her. It was against the law, a law made by the Prime Minister and his aides. When the Prime Minister thinks it was absolutely vital and important for morale that he was allowed to attend and make a speech and hold a drink at a leaving do for a colleague who was, by the way, still going to be alive after the day they left their job. I'm never going to forget that. I'm still angry about it. But let me put this to you. This idea that, well, the Prime Minister's laughing at us, he's betrayed us, he's lied to us, he's disrespected. This disrespect, particularly of the cleaners and the security guards, who are apparently the only people who knew what the law was in number 10 Downing Street for the last 2 years, that's all appalling. But a lot of people would say, people like you, people like Keir Starmer, far greater contempt for us ordinary voters. You are the people who wanted to betray our Brexit vote. You were happy to try and overturn that vote. You campaigned for that. You lost your seat. Keir Starmer, he campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to get elected. He tried to wanted a second referendum without enacting the first one. That shows actually much more contempt over a really serious issue, a democratic vote, than a lot of people would say contempt that has been shown undoubtedly to voters over raising a glass of fizz. What would you say to that?
Well, I disagree. I stood by my principles when I saw that the deal that was on offer was at complete variance with what had been promised in the Brexit referendum and indeed in the Conservative manifesto of 2017. But I could see that was the only deal on offer. I suggested it should be put back to the British public. I don't think that shows any contempt for democracy whatsoever. That was my aim. And I wasn't successful, and I've always accepted it. And I mean, it's worth bearing in mind that the criticism of Johnson's behaviour is not confined to people like me. I have lots of colleagues in the Conservative Party, former colleagues, with whom I keep friendly relations and have great respect for, who disagreed with me over that. Steve Baker, for example, yet Steve realises that the Prime Minister is in fact finished, or ought to be finished, and ought to go. So it's not the case. And I should also add that in the aftermath of Brexit, when Johnson had started in government, I was prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt that as Brexit was happening, he was entitled to my support. I'm still involved with various Conservative Party organisations. I was prepared to do that. I continued to support the Scottish Conservatives. I have to say I found it impossible to give money to the English Conservative Party after what had happened. But I did that. But I have to say, looking at Johnson and thinking, does he meet what I would regard as basic standards I would expect from a Conservative Prime Minister? He doesn't. He's not really a Conservative at all. So my party has been hijacked. And from that point of view, I think we are going to a very unpleasant end. And I feel sorry that the Conservative Party is going to end up like this. I actually think it could be destroyed by him. That may be slightly exaggerated because I appreciate that parties are quite resilient, but I think those of my colleagues at Westminster who are tolerating a Prime Minister who behaves like this are going to regret it.
Dominic Grieve, former Attorney General and Conservative MP, really appreciate you joining us.